when a paralyzed Marine in a wheelchair rolled into Glacier Valley Animal Shelter, demanding to adopt the most dangerous dog in Montana. The staff thought he'd lost his mind. "Sir, that's K9 Rex," Sarah Bennett warned, her voice tight. "He nearly killed 2 volunteers last week. He's scheduled to be euthanized in 48 hours. Sergeant James Carter didn't flinch. His weathered hands gripped the wheelchair armrests, knuckles white against the cold December air seeping through the shelter's doors. "I want to see him. Mr. Carter, I really don't think—" "I said I want to see him." His voice carried the weight of 20 years in the Marines. "Now." Sarah exchanged glances with her assistant. Outside, snow began to fall heavier, blanketing Missoula in white silence. What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about broken soldiers and dangerous dogs. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The basement stairs stretched down into darkness, each step marked by peeling yellow paint and the smell of disinfectant mixed with fear. Sarah led the way, her flashlight beam cutting through shadows that seemed to move on their own. Jim's wheelchair couldn't navigate the stairs, so 2 volunteers carried him down, their hands trembling as the sound grew louder, a growl, deep and primal, like distant thunder rolling across mountains. "That's him," Sarah whispered, stopping at the bottom. "We keep the aggressive ones down here, away from the others." The basement was colder than the floor above, concrete walls sweating with moisture. 4 empty kennels lined one side, their doors hanging open like mouths frozen mid-scream. But the 5th kennel, the one at the far end, shrouded in shadow, held something alive, something angry. Jim's wheelchair wheels creaked as the volunteers set him down and quickly retreated upstairs. Sarah stayed, though every instinct screamed at her to follow them. "Rex," she called softly, "someone's here to see you." The growling stopped. Silence pressed down, heavier than sound. Then came the scrape of claws on concrete, slow and deliberate. A shape moved in the darkness, massive and low to the ground. Jim rolled forward 3 feet. The fluorescent light overhead flickered once, twice, then steadied. In its harsh glow, he finally saw the dog. Rex was a German shepherd, 85 pounds of muscle and scars. His coat was black and tan, matted in places where he'd torn it himself. But it was his eyes that hit Jim like a fist to the chest, amber eyes that had seen too much, that held the same hollowness Jim saw in his own mirror every morning. Around Rex's neck hung a worn collar with a metal tag that caught the light. K9 Rex, Missoula PD. "Police dog," Jim said quietly. "Was," Sarah corrected. "His handler, Officer David Miller, was shot 8 months ago during a drug raid. Rex was there. He saw everything." Her voice cracked. "He tried to protect Miller, got clipped by a bullet himself. That scar on his shoulder." Jim's eyes found the raised pink line cutting through Rex's fur. "They brought him here after Miller died. Said he was too traumatized to work, too aggressive to adopt. He's been down here ever since, waiting for—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "For someone to kill him," Jim finished for her. Rex's lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed for war. The growl returned, vibrating through the concrete floor and up through Jim's useless legs. Every volunteer who'd tried to approach this dog had run. Every potential adopter had taken one look and backed away, but Jim didn't move, couldn't move even if he wanted to. Instead, he lifted his right pant leg, revealing a landscape of scars, pink and white road maps where bombs had rewritten his body's story. "I know, boy," Jim whispered. "I know exactly how you feel." The growl deepened, becoming something more than sound, a warning carved from pain and rage. Rex's massive head lowered, his body coiling like a spring wound too tight for too long. Sarah's hand moved toward her radio, ready to call for help, but Jim raised his hand. "Don't. Mr. Carter, if he attacks, he won't." Jim's voice carried a certainty that made Sarah pause. "Because he's not angry. He's terrified." Jim rolled his wheelchair forward another 2 feet. The kennel bars were within arm's reach now. Rex's hackles rose, a ridge of fur standing sharp along his spine. His breathing came in short, rapid bursts, the same pattern Jim recognized from his own panic attacks at 3 in the morning. "They tell you you're dangerous," Jim said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They look at you like you're a loaded gun that might go off any second. But you're not dangerous, are you? You're just still fighting a war that's already over?" Rex's ears twitched forward, then back, confusion flickering across his face. "I know what it's like," Jim continued, "to wake up and forget, just for 3 seconds, that everything's changed. To try to stand up and remember all over again that you can't. To see the pity in people's eyes and want to rip it out of them because pity is worse than hate." Sarah watched, transfixed, as something shifted in the basement's atmosphere. The anger bleeding from Rex seemed to waver, like a flame meeting wind. Jim's hands trembled on his wheelchair armrests. "Officer Miller, he was your partner, wasn't he? Your person." The words came harder now, each one dredged up from somewhere deep. "I had brothers, too, in Helmand Province. We called ourselves the Lucky Seven." His voice cracked. "Funny thing about luck? It runs out." The basement fell silent except for the buzz of the fluorescent light and the distant sound of dogs barking upstairs. Rex stopped growling. His body remained tense, but his eyes locked onto Jim's face with an intensity that was no longer threatening. It was searching. "There was an IED," Jim said. "Improvised explosive device, they call it. Like giving it a proper name makes it less obscene. I was on point that day. My job was to spot danger, to keep my brothers safe." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I missed it, walked right past it, and when it went off..." Jim's hands moved to his legs, to the dead weight that had once carried him through hell and back. "I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Germany. They told me I was lucky. Lucky because I survived. Lucky because I'd get a medal. Lucky because I'd go home to my wife and son. But 4 of my brothers didn't wake up. And the other 2..." His voice shattered completely. "Henderson died on the flight home. Garcia put a gun in his mouth 6 months after we got stateside." Tears tracked down Jim's weathered face. "So tell me, what exactly was I lucky about?" Sarah's own eyes burned. She'd never heard anyone speak so rawly about their pain. But Rex was moving, not away, but forward. One massive paw, then another, until his nose nearly touched the kennel bars. "My wife, Ellen," Jim continued, lost in memory. "She tried. God, she tried so hard to love the man I became. But I wasn't that man anymore. The Jim Carter who'd left for Afghanistan, the one who'd kiss her goodbye and promise to come home, he died in that explosion. What came back was just pieces wearing his face." Jim reached up and wiped his face with the back of his hand. "She got cancer 2 years after I came home. Stage 4. The doctor said she had 6 months. She fought for 8. And you know what kills me? I think part of her was relieved that she'd have an excuse to leave without having to admit she couldn't stand to look at me anymore." "Mr. Carter," Sarah whispered, but Jim shook his head. "My son, Tommy. He was 16 when I deployed, 21 when Ellen died. And he hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. 3 years of calls that go to voicemail, texts that say delivered but never read. Because every time he looks at me, he sees everything we lost, everything I cost us." Jim's breathing was ragged now, each word physically painful. They gave me medals. Purple Heart, Bronze Star. They pinned them on my chest at Walter Reed and called me a hero while I was thinking about the bottle of pills in my bag and how many it would take to make everything stop. Rex whined, a high, keening sound that cut through the basement like a knife. His amber eyes were fixed on Jim's face, and something passed between them. Recognition that went deeper than words, deeper than species. 2 weeks ago, I sat in my garage with the engine running, Jim said. Doors closed, windows up. I'd written the note, left it on the kitchen table with instructions for my funeral. Nothing fancy, no flag on the coffin. I didn't earn that. Just burn me and scatter the ashes where no one has to think about me again. Sarah's hand covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. But my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, you know what she did? She walked over and banged on that garage door until I opened it. Didn't ask questions, didn't give me some speech about how life is precious. She just said, "Jim Carter, you get your ass out here. We're going to the animal shelter." And I was so shocked that someone still saw me, still cared enough to be that bossy, that I went. Jim rolled closer to the kennel until his chair bumped gently against the bars. Rex didn't retreat. His body had loosened, the defensive tension melting into something else. Exhaustion, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. "So here's the truth, Rex," Jim said, his voice steadying. "They told me you're too dangerous to live, that you're broken beyond repair, that putting you down is mercy." He paused, his hand reaching slowly toward the bars. "But broken doesn't mean worthless, and dangerous doesn't mean evil. Sometimes it just means we're still trying to protect something, even when that something is already gone." Rex's wet nose touched Jim's fingertips through the bars. The contact was feather-light, tentative, as if testing whether this human would hurt him like all the others had tried to do. "I don't know if I can save you," Jim whispered. "Hell, I don't know if I can save myself. But maybe we don't have to be saved. Maybe we just need someone who understands that some wounds don't heal, they just become part of who we are." Sarah found her voice, thick with tears. "Mr. Carter, even if you want to adopt him, there are procedures, home visits, background checks, and with Rex's history—" "I'll sign whatever you need," Jim said, not taking his eyes off Rex. "Liability waivers, insurance. I don't care. This dog and we've got 48 hours to figure out if we want to keep living. Seems like we should at least spend them together." Rex's tail moved. Not a wag, not yet, just a small twitch, like a muscle remembering how to work. His body shifted, and slowly, so slowly, he lowered his massive head until it rested against the bars where Jim's hand waited. Jim's fingers slipped through the gap, touching the coarse fur of Rex's head. The dog's eyes closed. A deep, shuddering breath moved through his body, and for the first time in 8 months, the basement grew quiet. Not the quiet of fear or anger, but of something gentler, exhaustion meeting understanding. "Two broken soldiers," Jim murmured, stroking Rex's scarred head. "Maybe that's one whole human being between us." Sarah wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "I'll get the paperwork started. But Mr. Carter, you need to understand. If there's any incident, any sign of aggression, the court can order immediate euthanasia. No appeals, no second chances." "There won't be any incidents," Jim said with a conviction he hadn't felt about anything in 5 years. "Because we understand each other now. Don't we, boy?" Rex's tail twitched again, stronger this time. And when Jim's hand moved from his head to scratch behind his ears, the massive German shepherd leaned into the touch like a puppy seeking comfort, like a soldier finally standing down after the longest watch of his life. The paperwork took 3 hours. Sarah brought form after form to the basement, unwilling to leave Jim and Rex alone, but unable to deny what she was witnessing. Each time she descended those stairs, she found them in the same position, Jim's hand through the bars, Rex's head pressed against his palm, two souls finding something neither had thought possible anymore. The waiver forms were brutal in their honesty. I understand that K9 Rex has been designated as dangerously aggressive. I acknowledge the risk of severe injury or death. I waive all rights to legal action against Glacier Valley Animal Shelter. Jim signed each one without reading, his attention never leaving the dog whose amber eyes tracked his every movement. When the final signature was dry, Sarah unlocked the kennel door. The metallic click echoed through the basement like a gunshot. Rex's body went rigid, his ears flattening against his skull. Every muscle tensed, ready to bolt or fight. The kennel had been his prison, but it had also been the only safe thing in a world that had turned hostile. "Easy, boy," Jim murmured. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." But Rex didn't move. 8 months of captivity had taught him that open doors were tricks, that hope was the cruelest lie of all. His eyes darted between Jim and Sarah, calculating threats, measuring distances to run. Jim understood. He'd spent 2 years after coming home unable to leave his bedroom, convinced that the world beyond that door held only more pain. "I know," he said softly. "I know it's terrifying. But staying in there, that's not safety, Rex. That's just a slower way to die." He backed his wheelchair away from the kennel, giving Rex space. "Come out when you're ready. I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere." Minutes passed. 5, 10. Sarah shifted her weight, ready to intervene if needed, though she had no idea what intervention would even look like. Then, slowly, Rex's right paw crossed the threshold. He paused, testing whether the floor beyond the kennel would hold him or swallow him whole. When nothing terrible happened, the left paw followed. Rex emerged fully, his body low and cautious. He was bigger outside the kennel, more solid, but also more vulnerable. His tail tucked tight against his hindquarters, his ears still flat. Every line of his body screamed wariness, but his eyes never left Jim's face. "That's it," Jim encouraged. "One step at a time. That's all any of us can do." Rex took 3 steps toward Jim's wheelchair, then stopped. His nose lifted, scenting the air. Whatever he found there, gun oil from Jim's old Marine jacket, the particular soap used at the VA hospital, or maybe just the shared smell of survivors' sweat, it made something shift in his posture. The tail lifted slightly, no longer plastered in absolute fear. "Sarah," Jim said quietly, "go ahead upstairs, get his things ready, food, leash, whatever he needs." "Are you sure? If he won't." "Go on." Sarah hesitated, then climbed the stairs, her footsteps fading into the distance above. The basement door closed with a soft thump, leaving Jim and Rex alone in the fluorescent-lit space that had been both witness and tomb to Rex's grief. The silence settled between them, different now. Not the silence of standoff, but of two beings taking measure of each other without the interference of the outside world. Rex sat, his haunches lowering carefully as if the movement caused pain. Maybe it did. 8 months of pacing in a kennel left its marks on more than just the mind. "You know what nobody tells you?" Jim spoke into the quiet. "They don't tell you that the hardest part isn't the explosion. It's the after. It's waking up every day and having to remember how to be a person when you feel like you died back there with your brothers." Rex's head tilted slightly, that universal canine gesture of attention and confusion. "I used to be somebody," Jim continued, his voice taking on a dreamy quality, lost in memory. "Captain of my high school football team, enlisted at 18 because I wanted to serve something bigger than myself. Made sergeant by 25. Had a wife who looked at me like I hung the moon. A kid who thought his dad could do anything. His hands tightened on the wheelchair armrests. Funny how fast anything becomes nothing. Rex stood and moved closer. 3 feet away now. Close enough that Jim could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, the white hairs starting to pepper his muzzle despite his young age, stress aging, the same premature gray that streaked Jim's own temples. Ellen used to leave pamphlets around the house, Jim said. Support groups for veterans, therapy options, like talking about it would somehow undo what happened, would magic my legs back into working, would resurrect my brothers from their graves. He laughed, bitter and sharp. She meant well. They all did. But there's no support group for I led my brothers to their deaths. No therapy for I'm the wrong one who survived. Rex's ears pricked forward, fully attentive now. He took another step, then another, until his massive head was inches from Jim's knee, the knee that couldn't feel the warmth of the dog's breath, that registered nothing but phantom sensations of a life before. You lost someone too, Jim said, reaching down slowly. His hand hovered above Rex's head, giving the dog every chance to refuse the touch. Officer Miller, your partner, the one person in the world who understood you, who trusted you with his life, and you couldn't save him. Rex's body trembled. A low whine built in his chest, not aggressive but mournful, a sound that carried 8 months of unanswered questions, of loyalty that had nowhere to land, of love that had been violently interrupted. That's survivor's guilt, buddy, Jim whispered, his hand finally connecting with Rex's head, stroking the soft fur between his ears. That voice in your head that says you should have done more, been faster, been better. That voice that says it should have been you instead. Rex pressed his head harder into Jim's palm, seeking pressure, seeking contact, seeking proof that connection was still possible in a world that had taught him only loss. His tail began to move, slowly at first, still cautious, still learning, but unmistakably a wag. But here's what I'm starting to figure out, Jim said, his voice thick. Maybe it's not about saving them. Maybe it's about honoring them, about taking the time we got, time they didn't, and doing something with it. Even if that something is just surviving one more day. Rex's whole body began to relax, the defensive tension draining away like water from a broken dam. He leaned into Jim's wheelchair, his weight substantial and real, and Jim felt something he hadn't felt since before the explosion. Needed. Not pitied, not tolerated, but genuinely needed by another living being. The basement door opened above, and Sarah's voice called down, "Mr. Carter? I've got everything ready. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Jim's hand stilled on Rex's head. "Who?" "Councilman Bradley Morrison. He's insisting. Tell him I'm busy." I tried. He says it's about Rex. Says there are concerns about the adoption. Jim's jaw tightened. Rex sensed the shift in his body language immediately, his ears swiveling toward the stairs, a low growl building in his chest, not at Jim, but at the threat of separation his instincts sensed. "It's okay, boy," Jim soothed, though his own heart hammered against his ribs. "Nobody's taking you away from me. Not now. Not ever." But as footsteps descended the stairs, confident, authoritative footsteps that spoke of power and position, Jim felt the old helplessness creeping back. He'd fought in Afghanistan, survived an IED, endured 2 years of hospitals and rehabilitation, buried his wife and lost his son. But in this moment, facing down bureaucracy and small-town politics with nothing but a wheelchair and a dog everyone wanted dead, he felt as powerless as the day he'd woken up and realized he'd never walk again. Bradley Morrison appeared at the bottom of the stairs, a tall man in his mid-50s with silver hair and a politician's smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore an expensive wool coat dusted with snow, leather gloves, and the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. "Sergeant Carter," Morrison said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "I'm sorry to interrupt your moment, but we need to talk about this animal." "His name is Rex," Jim said flatly. "And he's not an animal. He's a war veteran, just like me." Morrison's smile tightened. "Yes, well, that's precisely the problem, isn't it? War veterans, both human and canine, sometimes come home with issues that make them unsuitable for civilian life." Rex's growl deepened, his body positioning itself between Jim's wheelchair and Morrison. Not attacking, not threatening, protecting. "Unsuitable," Jim repeated, the word tasting like acid. "Is that what you called my brothers when they came home missing pieces of themselves? Unsuitable? Is that what you call men who served their country and got broken in the process?" Morrison's facade cracked slightly. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. But this dog has a documented history of aggression. 2 volunteers injured, multiple attempted attacks. The liability is mine. I signed the waivers. Those waivers won't mean much when that animal tears into a child at the park, when it attacks another dog, when it—" Morrison's eyes flicked to Jim's wheelchair. "When it turns on you because you can't physically defend yourself." The words hung in the cold basement air, cruel in their calculation. Sarah gasped, but Jim just stared at Morrison, seeing something behind the man's carefully constructed anger. "This isn't about liability," Jim said slowly. "This is personal for you." "Why?" Morrison's jaw worked, and for a moment his mask slipped entirely. Raw pain flashed across his face. Old pain. The kind that burrows into your bones and makes a home there. "My brother," he said finally. 15 years ago. A police dog, not so different from this one, attacked him during an arrest. Tore out his throat. He died before the ambulance arrived." The basement fell silent. Even Rex's growling ceased, as if the weight of Morrison's grief demanded respect. "I'm sorry," Jim said, and meant it. "That's a terrible loss." "Is it?" Morrison's voice turned sharp. "Because according to the police report, my brother was resisting arrest, reaching for a weapon. The dog did exactly what it was trained to do. Everyone said the system worked, that the dog was a hero." His hands clenched into fists. "But I buried my brother, and I've spent 15 years watching this town celebrate those animals while his grave grows over with weeds." Jim studied Morrison's face, seeing beyond the politician's mask to the grieving brother underneath. "Your brother," he said carefully. "What was his name?" Morrison's eyes flickered with surprise at the question. Daniel Morrison." His voice softened fractionally. "He was younger than me by 3 years, always getting into trouble, always pushing boundaries. But he was my brother, and I loved him." "Daniel," Jim repeated, letting the name settle between them. "Tell me about him. Not about how he died, about how he lived." Morrison's shoulders sagged slightly, the rigid posture of authority giving way to something more human. "He was wild, reckless, drove our mother crazy with worry." A ghost of a real smile touched his lips. "But he had this laugh, this big, booming laugh that could fill a room. And he was loyal, stupidly loyal. Would take a beating for a friend without thinking twice." "Sounds like someone worth remembering," Jim said. "Worth honoring." "Don't." Morrison's walls snapped back up. "Don't try to manipulate me with psychology, Sergeant. I know what you're doing, but it doesn't change the facts. That dog is dangerous. My brother is dead, And I won't stand by while this town risks more lives on the misguided notion that every broken thing deserves saving." Rex shifted, his body tense but controlled. His eyes tracked Morrison, reading threat levels with the precision of his training. But he didn't attack, didn't lunge. He simply stood his ground, waiting for Jim's command that never came. "You're right," Jim said, and Morrison blinked in surprise. "Not every broken thing deserves saving. Some things are too far gone. Some wounds are too deep." He paused, his hand finding Rex's head. "But how do you know which is which unless you try? Unless you give them a chance to prove they're worth the effort?" "I know," Morrison said firmly, "because I've seen the statistics. Aggressive dogs, especially those with PTSD, have a 78% recidivism rate. That means 22% make it," Jim interrupted. 22% find their way back, learn to live again, become something other than their worst moment." His voice dropped. "Same odds they gave me. 78% chance I'd eat my gun within 5 years of coming home, but here I am, still breathing, still trying." Morrison's face hardened. "This isn't about you, Sergeant Carter. This is about public safety. As a member of the town council, I have a responsibility." "To do what?" Jim's voice rose, echoing off the concrete walls. "To make sure nothing bad ever happens. To eliminate every risk, every uncertainty. That's not responsibility, Morrison. That's fear dressed up as policy." "How dare you?" "I dare because I've lived your worst nightmare." Jim's hands slammed against his wheelchair armrests. "I am the 78% that failed. The soldier who came home broken, the liability everyone whispers about. And you know what? You're right to be afraid. Because broken soldiers do hurt people, not with teeth and claws, but with our silence, with our absence, with the empty chairs at Christmas dinner and the phone calls we don't return, and the slow, agonizing way we disappear while everyone watches and does nothing." Morrison stood frozen, Jim's words hitting him like physical blows. "Your brother died instantly," Jim continued, his voice cracking. "Terrible, tragic, unfair. But he didn't have to live 15 years, knowing he was the reason you couldn't move forward. Didn't have to watch you turn into this—" He gestured at Morrison's expensive suit, his politician's demeanor. "This crusader against anything that reminds you of what you lost." "You don't know anything about what I've become," Morrison said, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. "Don't I?" Jim wheeled closer, Rex moving in perfect sync beside him. "I know about turning pain into purpose, about building walls so high nobody can see you're dying inside, about fighting battles that have nothing to do with the real war, the one inside your own head where your brother's face keeps asking why you couldn't save him." Morrison's breath caught audibly. For a moment, his carefully constructed facade crumbled entirely. "Every night," he whispered, "every night for 15 years I see that moment. The call from the hospital, the identification of his body, the funeral where everyone kept saying it wasn't my fault, that there was nothing I could have done." His eyes glistened. "But I was supposed to protect him. I was the older brother. That was my job." Jim's anger drained away, replaced by a profound understanding. "And you think destroying every dog like Rex will somehow fulfill that duty? Will somehow make Daniel's death mean something? I think," Morrison said, his voice steadier now, "that preventing others from experiencing what I did is the only way I know how to honor him." "By spreading the pain around?" Jim shook his head. "By making sure other brothers, human or canine, don't get the second chance Daniel didn't have. That's not honor, Morrison. That's revenge against the world for continuing to turn after his stopped." The basement fell silent except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and Rex's steady breathing. Sarah, who had been watching from the stairs, wiped tears from her face but didn't interrupt. Morrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to something unreadable. "There's a town council meeting next Wednesday," he said finally. "A hearing about this adoption, about whether to implement new regulations regarding aggressive animal placements." He looked directly at Jim. "They'll be voting on whether to allow you to keep him, or to proceed with euthanasia." "You mean you'll be voting?" Jim said. "I mean the council will vote, 3 members. I'm just one voice." But Morrison's tone suggested his voice carried considerable weight. "What will you recommend?" Jim asked. Morrison stared at Rex, who stood calm and alert beside Jim's wheelchair. "I honestly don't know." He turned to leave, then paused halfway to the stairs. "Sergeant Carter, that 22%, the ones who make it, what makes them different from the 78% who don't?" Jim was quiet for a long moment. Someone believing they're worth saving, even when they don't believe it themselves. Morrison nodded slowly, then climbed the stairs without another word. The door closed behind him with a finality that felt like a ticking clock starting its countdown. Sarah descended immediately. "Jim, this is bad. Morrison has been trying to pass anti-aggressive dog legislation for years. If he pushes this at the council meeting—" "I know." Jim's hand stroked Rex's head, finding comfort in the simple action. "We've got 5 days to prove Rex isn't a threat. 5 days to show he can be trusted." "How? He can't be around other people without—" "He's around you right now," Jim pointed out. "And me. And he hasn't shown an ounce of aggression since I got down here." Sarah looked at Rex, really looked at him. The dog sat perfectly still, his attention focused on Jim with an intensity that spoke of loyalty, not violence. "That's true," she admitted. "But Morrison isn't wrong about the statistics. Most dogs with Rex's trauma history don't rehabilitate, and the few that do require extensive professional training, therapy, sometimes years of work. We don't have years. We have 5 days." Jim met her eyes. "But maybe that's enough. Maybe all Rex needs isn't time, it's purpose, something to protect. Someone to serve." His hand moved from Rex's head to his collar, fingers tracing the worn metal tag. He was a K9, trained to work, to have a mission. They didn't just take his handler away, they took his reason for existing. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. "You're going to train him. Register him as a service dog. Not train, remind. Everything he needs to know is already in there. It's just buried under grief and fear." Jim's jaw set with determination that had carried him through 20 years of military service. "And I know something about digging through grief to find what's worth keeping." Sarah bit her lip. "It's risky. If he shows aggression toward anyone before the hearing, Morrison will use it as proof he's beyond help. You won't just lose Rex. You'll give Morrison the ammunition he needs to pass laws that could affect every traumatized animal in Montana." "Then he won't show aggression," Jim said simply. "How can you be sure?" Jim looked at Rex, saw himself reflected in those amber eyes, the same confusion, the same pain, the same desperate need for someone to see past the wounds to the warrior underneath. "Because he's not aggressive. He's protective. There's a difference. And I'm going to teach this town to recognize it." Sarah shook her head, but she was smiling through her tears. "You're either very brave or very crazy, Jim Carter." "Probably both." Jim turned his wheelchair toward the stairs. "Now let's get out of this basement. First lesson for Rex. The world above isn't as dangerous as the world in here. And first lesson for the world, neither is he." Rex followed Jim's wheelchair to the base of the stairs, then stopped. His eyes tracked upward to where daylight filtered down from the main floor, brighter and more vast than anything in his recent memory. His body tensed, old instincts screaming at him to retreat to the safety of the known, the contained, the controllable. I know," Jim said softly. "I know it's terrifying. The world got bigger since you were last in it. Bigger and meaner and full of things that can hurt you." He held out his hand, palm up, an offering. But it's also got things worth living for. You just have to trust me long enough to find them." Rex's eyes moved from the stairs to Jim's face, then back again. His tail tucked slightly, uncertainty written in every line of his body. But something in Jim's voice, some quality of understanding, of shared experience, pulled him forward. One paw on the first stair, then another, climbing upward into the unknown, trusting a stranger, because that stranger knew what it was like to be afraid and broken and still have to move forward anyway. The main floor of the shelter assaulted Rex's senses. Fluorescent lights blazed overhead, so different from the dim basement cave where shadows had been his only companion. The cacophony of barking dogs erupted from the kennels lining both walls. Terriers, retrievers, pit bulls, all crying out in their various languages of loneliness and hope. The smell hit him next. Disinfectant, urine, fear sweat from a dozen breeds, and underneath it all, the scent of humans who meant well but understood little. Rex's body went rigid. His hackles rose instinctively, his lips pulling back to reveal teeth that had once brought down armed suspects. Sarah tensed, her hand moving toward the catch-pole mounted on the wall, the tool used to control dangerous dogs from a safe distance. But Jim's voice cut through the chaos. "Rex, sit." It was a command, but spoken with the kind of authority that came from leading men in combat, not from dominating animals. Rex's hindquarters lowered automatically, muscle memory from years of canine training overriding his panic. His eyes never left Jim's face, seeking guidance in the overwhelming sensory storm. "Good boy," Jim said quietly. "See? You remember. You remember what it means to work, to serve, to trust." He wheeled forward slowly, and Rex rose to follow, staying close to the wheelchair's right side, the exact position he'd been trained to maintain beside Officer Miller's patrol car. Sarah exhaled slowly. I've never seen him respond to commands before, not since Miller." "Because no one gave them to him the right way," Jim said. "They treated him like he was broken. But he's not broken. He's just waiting for someone who speaks his language." They moved through the shelter toward the front entrance. Every step was a negotiation between fear and trust. When a volunteer rounded the corner carrying a mop bucket, Rex's body coiled to lunge. But Jim's hand dropped to his head immediately, grounding him. "Easy, friend, not foe. Stand down." Rex's muscles unknotted. The volunteer froze, eyes wide with recognition and terror. Is that Rex? The one who—" "This is Rex," Jim confirmed. "And he's going home with me. You can lower your heart rate now. He's not going to hurt you." "How do you know?" "Because I told him not to." Jim's tone left no room for argument. "And because he's a professional, aren't you, boy?" Rex's tail gave a tentative wag. The volunteer edged past them, never taking his eyes off the German shepherd, but Rex remained perfectly still until the man was out of sight. Then he looked up at Jim as if seeking approval, seeking confirmation that he'd done well. "That's right," Jim murmured. "That's exactly right. One moment at a time. One person at a time. That's how we rebuild trust." Sarah gathered Rex's paperwork and a bag of supplies. Food, medications, a worn red Kong toy that Miller had used for training. "There's one more thing," she said hesitantly. "The town council hearing isn't just about whether you can keep him. Morrison is also pushing for mandatory behavioral evaluations for all adopted dogs. If they pass it retroactively, Rex will have to be assessed by a court-appointed animal behaviorist." "And if he fails?" Jim asked, though he already knew the answer. "Immediate euthanasia, no appeals." Sarah's voice dropped. "Jim, these evaluators, they're looking for any sign of aggression, any indication of unpredictability, and Rex's history. One wrong move, one misinterpreted behavior, and they'll use it as justification." Jim's jaw tightened. "Then he won't give them anything to misinterpret." The automatic doors slid open, revealing the Montana winter beyond. Snow fell in thick curtains, transforming the parking lot into a white void. The cold hit them immediately, sharp and biting. Rex balked at the threshold, his paws scrambling backward on the linoleum. The world outside was too big, too open, too full of variables he couldn't control or predict. "I know," Jim said. "It's been 8 months since you felt snow, since you breathed air that wasn't recycled through vents, since you had sky above you instead of ceiling." He wheeled out into the snow, the flakes catching on his graying hair, melting against his weathered skin. "But this is freedom, Rex. It's scary as hell, but it's real. Come on." Rex's body trembled. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat to the basement, to the known horror rather than the unknown possibility. But Jim was out there, sitting in the snow without fear, without hesitation. And something in Rex, some buried piece of the dog he'd been before the shooting, before the loss, before the basement, responded. One paw touched snow. The cold sensation shot through him, foreign and familiar all at once. Then another paw, and another, until he stood fully outside, 4 legs planted in 3 inches of fresh powder, his breath coming in visible clouds that dissipated into the gray December sky. "There you are," Jim said softly. "There's the warrior I knew was in there." Sarah appeared with a leash, but Jim waved it away. "He doesn't need it. Do you, boy? You're not going to run. Where would you even go? What would you even be running to?" He started wheeling toward his modified van at the far end of the parking lot. "No, you're going to walk beside me because that's what you do, that's who you are." And Rex did. He fell into step beside the wheelchair, matching Jim's pace exactly, his training reasserting itself after months of disuse. Past the other vehicles, through the falling snow, toward the dark blue van with handicap plates and a lift for Jim's wheelchair. Several people in the parking lot stared, one woman pulling her child closer as they passed. But Rex didn't react, didn't threaten. He simply walked, a soldier executing orders, finding purpose in the simple act of accompanying his new handler through hostile territory. Jim activated the van's lift with a key fob. The mechanical whir made Rex's ears flatten, but he held his ground. "Just a machine," Jim explained. "Loud, but harmless, like a lot of things in this world, scary until you understand them." The lift descended, and Jim wheeled onto it. "Come on up, Rex. There's room for both of us." Rex hesitated, eyeing the metal platform with suspicion. But Jim waited patiently, not forcing, not demanding, just expecting. And that expectation, that unwavering belief that Rex would do the right thing, proved more powerful than any command. Rex stepped onto the lift, his weight making it dip slightly. The sensation of the platform rising made his claws scrabble for purchase, but Jim's hand found his head, steadying him. "That's it. Almost there. Just a little faith. That's all this takes." The lift reached the van's floor level. Inside, the vehicle had been completely modified. Driver's controls adapted for hand operation, the back converted into a space where a wheelchair could lock into place. There was also room for a dog, a space clearly designed for a service animal, complete with a non-slip mat and attachment points for safety harnesses. "This used to be for a different dog," Jim said, as Rex sniffed the space cautiously. "A service dog the VA tried to give me 3 years ago. A golden retriever named Buddy, all soft eyes and gentle temperament. Perfect for a disabled vet, they said. Would fetch things, alert me to panic attacks, provide emotional support." His voice turned bitter. "I sent him back after 2 weeks. Couldn't stand the way he looked at me, like I was something fragile that might shatter any moment." Rex turned his amber eyes on Jim, and in them was no pity, no gentle condescension, only recognition, only understanding. "But you," Jim continued, You don't look at me like I'm broken. You look at me like I'm your commanding officer, like I'm someone worth following into the unknown." He swallowed hard. "And that's what I need. Not someone to take care of me, but someone to stand with me. Think you can do that?" Rex's answer was to jump into the van, claim the space on the mat, and sit at attention, waiting for the next command, the next mission, the next moment of purpose in a life that had been stripped of all meaning. Jim felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but blooming. "Yeah," he whispered. "Yeah, I think we're going to be just fine." The drive to Jim's house took 20 minutes through the snow-clogged streets of Missoula. Rex remained alert the entire time, his eyes tracking every vehicle, every pedestrian, every potential threat with the hypervigilance of PTSD. But when Jim spoke, a running commentary about the town, the mountains, the life they were driving toward, Rex's body would relax fractionally, pulled back from the edge by the sound of a voice that understood. "That's the VA hospital," Jim said, nodding toward a brick building as they passed. "Spent 18 months there learning how to live in this chair, learning how to dress myself, how to drive, how to pretend I was okay when I wanted to die." He glanced back at Rex. "You ever feel that way? Like you're just going through the motions because that's what everyone expects, but inside you're already gone?" Rex's ears swiveled toward Jim's voice, head tilting slightly. That universal gesture of canine listening, of caring. "Course you have. I can see it in your eyes. That's why we're going to work, you and me. Because we're both ghosts trying to remember how to be real." They turned onto a residential street where small houses sat back from the road, separated by snow-covered yards and bare trees. Jim's house was halfway down, a modest one-story ranch with a wheelchair ramp leading to the front door and a garage that had been converted into what looked like a workshop. "Home," Jim announced, though the word tasted strange in his mouth. It hadn't felt like home since Ellen died, since Tommy stopped calling, since the silence became so loud it drowned out everything else. But now, with Rex in the back of the van, the word carried a different weight, a possibility. He parked in the driveway and opened the van's back doors. The cold rushed in, and with it the smell of pine from the surrounding trees, of wood smoke from someone's fireplace, of a neighborhood settling into evening. Rex emerged cautiously, his paws sinking into deeper snow than the shelter parking lot. He shook himself, sending powder flying, then looked to Jim for guidance. "Welcome home, boy," Jim said, wheeling toward the ramp. "It's not much. 2 bedrooms, one of which I never go into anymore. Kitchen I barely use. Living room with a couch that's seen better days and a TV that mostly plays the same 3 channels." He reached the front door and fumbled with his keys. "But it's quiet, private. No one to tell us what to do or how broken we're supposed to be." The door swung open, revealing a space that looked exactly like what it was, a place where someone existed but didn't live. Minimal furniture, no decorations, nothing on the walls except darker rectangles where family photos used to hang before Jim had packed them away, unable to bear the reminder of who he'd been before Afghanistan turned him into this. Rex entered slowly, nose working overtime to catalog this new territory. He moved from room to room with Jim following, allowing the dog to establish that there were no threats, no traps, no horrors waiting in corners. The bedroom door stood open, revealing a hospital-style bed and more medical equipment than a home should need. Rex paused there, sensing something, grief maybe, or the ghost of the woman who died in that bed while her husband sat helpless beside her. "Ellen's room," Jim said quietly. "I mean, our room. But it became hers at the end. She wanted to die at home, and I wanted to give her that much at least, even if I couldn't give her anything else." His hands gripped the wheelchair armrests. She called your name in her sleep sometimes. Near the end, when the morphine had her confused, she'd say, "Rex, come here, baby," and I'd think she meant the neighbor's dog she used to walk before I came home. Took me the longest time to realize she was calling for our old dog, the one we had when Tommy was little. Golden retriever named Rex, who died of cancer 10 years ago. Rex stood in the doorway of that bedroom, his body absolutely still. Then, slowly, deliberately, he crossed the threshold and sat beside Jim's wheelchair, his massive head lowered until it rested on Jim's knee, the knee that couldn't feel the warmth, that registered nothing but the visual confirmation of connection, but Jim felt it somewhere deeper, in a place beneath nerve endings and muscle memory. "Yeah," Jim whispered, his hand finding Rex's head. "Yeah, maybe she was calling for you, too. Maybe she knew I'd need you before I did." They sat like that for a long moment, two beings haunted by different ghosts, finding unexpected communion in shared silence. Then Rex lifted his head and moved to the corner of the room where Ellen's oxygen tank still stood, a monument to those final months. He sniffed it once, cataloging information, then turned his back on it with a finality that seemed intentional. The past is past. That's what the gesture said. We're here now. That's what matters. "Smart dog," Jim murmured. "Smarter than me. I've been living in this tomb for 2 years, keeping everything exactly like she left it. Like if I changed one thing, I'd lose what little I have left of her." He looked around the room with new eyes. "But you're right. She's gone. And keeping this room like a shrine doesn't honor her. It just keeps me chained to the worst day of my life." Rex returned to Jim's side, and together they left the bedroom, Jim pulling the door closed behind them with a soft click that felt like the end of something, or maybe the beginning. The living room beckoned, less fraught with memory. Jim wheeled to the couch and transferred himself onto it with practiced movements born of necessity. Rex immediately claimed the space beside him, not on the floor where dogs traditionally belonged, but on the couch itself, pressed against Jim's side like a battle buddy keeping watch. "Breaking all the rules already," Jim said with something that almost resembled a laugh. "Ellen would have had a fit. No dogs on furniture, that was her rule, but Ellen's not here. And I think maybe some rules are meant to be broken." The afternoon faded into evening. Outside, the snow continued to fall, coating the world in white silence. Inside, Jim dozed fitfully, his sleep plagued by the usual nightmares, the explosion, the screaming, the weight of Henderson's hand in his until it went limp and lifeless. But this time, when he jerked awake with a gasp, sweat soaking his shirt despite the winter cold, there was something new. Rex's head was on his lap, the dog's amber eyes alert and focused, filled with an understanding that went beyond training. "You have them too," Jim rasped, his throat raw from the scream he'd swallowed before it could escape. "The nightmares, the memories that won't let you rest." Rex's tail thumped once against the couch cushion. Not a happy wag, but an acknowledgement. "I know. I understand. You're not alone in this." Jim's hand trembled as it moved to Rex's head, finding comfort in the solid warmth of the dog's presence. "They tell you it gets easier. That time heals all wounds. But that's a lie, isn't it? Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to carry the weight better, how to fake normalcy so everyone else feels comfortable around your pain." A knock at the door shattered the moment. Rex was on his feet instantly, body tense, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Jim's heart hammered. Visitors were rare, unwelcome. The world had learned to leave him alone, and he'd learned to prefer it that way. "Easy, boy," Jim said, reaching for his wheelchair. "Let me see who it is." Through the front window he could see a figure on his porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket that looked familiar even through the distortion of falling snow. Jim's breath caught. He knew that silhouette had spent 3 years trying to forget it. "Tommy," he whispered. Rex's growl intensified, picking up on Jim's distress. The knock came again, more insistent. Jim transferred back to his wheelchair and approached the door, every rotation of the wheels feeling like rolling toward a firing squad. His hand hovered over the doorknob. "Dad?" Tommy's voice came through the door, muffled but unmistakable. "Dad, I know you're in there. Your van's in the driveway. Please, I need to talk to you." Jim's fingers closed around the knob but didn't turn it. "Go away, Tommy." "I can't. I won't. I've been going away for 3 years and I'm done with it." A pause. "I heard about the dog, about what you're trying to do. Morrison's been all over the local news pushing his agenda. Dad, please, let me in." "Why?" Jim's voice cracked. "So you can tell me I'm making another mistake. That I'm not fit to care for a dog any more than I was fit to be your father after I came home." Silence. Then, "So, I can tell you, I'm sorry." The words hung in the air like snowflakes suspended in time. Jim's hand trembled on the knob. Rex pressed against his legs, offering support, offering strength. With a deep breath that felt like surfacing from deep water, Jim opened the door. Tommy stood on the porch, and Jim's first thought was how much his son had aged. At 24, Tommy should have been in his prime, but grief and guilt had carved lines around his eyes, had put gray at his temples that shouldn't be there for another 20 years. He looked like Jim felt, like someone who'd survived when surviving felt like punishment. "Can I come in?" Tommy asked, his eyes moving from Jim to Rex and back again. "I promise I'm not here to judge, I'm not here to fight. I need to talk to you." Jim wheeled backward, allowing space. Tommy stepped inside, shaking snow from his jacket. The movement was sudden, too quick, and Rex's body coiled with tension. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth, a warning growl building in his chest. "Rex, stand down," Jim commanded. "This is Tommy, my son, not a threat." But Rex wasn't so sure. His training told him to assess based on behavior, not words, and Tommy's entrance had triggered every alarm. Still, he held his position, trusting Jim's judgment even as every instinct screamed otherwise. Tommy froze, his eyes locked on the German Shepherd. "Jesus, Dad. That's him? That's the dog Morrison wants destroyed?" "That's Rex," Jim corrected. "And Morrison wants him destroyed because he's afraid. Because Rex represents everything Morrison can't control. Everything that reminds him of his own failures and losses." "And you think you can control him?" "Dad, look at him. He's ready to tear my throat out." "He's ready to protect me," Jim said calmly. "There's a difference." "Rex, come." The dog moved immediately to Jim's side, though his eyes never left Tommy. "Sit." Rex sat, perfect obedience, perfect form. "See? Not out of control, not dangerous, just loyal to someone who finally gave him a reason to be." Tommy's expression shifted, something crumbling in his careful composure. "Like me," he whispered. "I was loyal to you, worshipped you. And then you came back and you were different, wrong, and I didn't know how to be loyal to someone I didn't recognize anymore." Jim's throat tightened. "So you left." "So I ran," Tommy corrected, "like a coward, because watching you suffer was harder than any pain I'd ever known. And I was 21 and stupid, and I thought if I just didn't look at it, it would stop being real." His voice broke. "But it didn't stop being real. It just meant I wasn't there. Wasn't there when you needed me. Wasn't there when Mom died. Wasn't there when you—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "When I almost joined her," Jim supplied quietly. Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Mrs. Patterson called me. Last month. Told me you'd been in the garage with the engine running, that she'd saved you, but she was scared she wouldn't be there next time. And I told myself I'd come, I'd visit, I'd fix things." He laughed bitterly. "But I didn't. I made excuses. Until I saw Morrison on the news, talking about this dangerous dog some paralyzed veteran was trying to adopt, and I realized that was you. That was my father doing something brave while I sat in Seattle pretending I didn't have a family in Montana." Jim looked at his son, really looked at him for the first time in 3 years, saw past the anger and abandonment to the terrified young man who'd watched his hero fall and hadn't known how to help him stand back up. "You're here now," he said finally. "That's what matters." "Is it?" Tommy's voice was raw. "Is it enough? Can you forgive me for leaving when you needed me most?" Rex whined softly, sensing the emotional weight in the room. His body had relaxed slightly, no longer viewing Tommy as an immediate threat, but his attention remained divided between the two humans who were clearly pack, clearly bound by something deeper than command and obedience. Jim was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to say yes. Want to be the bigger man, the father who understands and forgives everything. But Tommy, you left me. You left me in the dark, and I didn't think I'd make it out. There were nights, so many nights, when I thought about your mother's pills, still in the medicine cabinet, when I thought about that gun in my drawer, and I'd reach for my phone to call you, to hear your voice, to remember why I was supposed to keep living, and every time I'd see those unread texts, those unanswered calls. And I'd think, if my own son can't stand to talk to me, why should I bother staying?" Tommy collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor, his head in his hands. "God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry." "Don't apologize to me," Jim said, his voice hardening. "Apologize to the man I used to be. The one who went to Afghanistan believing his son loved him enough to be there when he got back. Apologize to your mother, who died asking where you were, why you wouldn't come see her one last time. Apologize to yourself for throwing away 3 years you can never get back." The words were harsh, cutting, but they needed to be said, needed to lance the wound that had been festering between them. Tommy sobbed openly now, all pretense of control shattered, and Rex watched it all with those knowing amber eyes, understanding in the way only a creature who'd lost everything could understand. Then something unexpected happened. Rex stood, walked to Tommy, and sat down beside him, not aggressively, not threateningly, just present, his massive head lowered to Tommy's shoulder, offering the same comfort he'd offered Jim earlier, the same silent acknowledgement. "I know. I understand. You're not alone in this." Tommy's hands found Rex's fur, clutching it like a lifeline. "He's supposed to be dangerous," he choked out. "Morrison says he's a killer, but he's exactly what he needs to be," Jim said softly. "Dangerous to threats, gentle with pain, smart enough to know the difference." He wheeled closer to his son and his dog, this strange trinity of broken beings. "Maybe that's what we all are. Dangerous and gentle, threatening and healing. Depends on who's looking and what they need to see." Tommy stayed until the snow stopped falling and the Montana sky cleared to reveal stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. They talked, really talked, for the first time in 3 years, about Ellen's death, about Jim's injuries, about the guilt that had carved canyons between them, about the ways they'd failed each other and the possibility, however fragile, of finding their way back. Rex remained with Tommy the entire time, as if sensing that this young man needed the comfort even more than Jim did. When Tommy finally rose to leave, his eyes were red but clearer than they'd been in years. "I want to help," Tommy said at the door. "With the hearing, with Morrison, with whatever you need to prove Rex deserves to live." Jim studied his son's face, searching for sincerity, for commitment, for proof that this wasn't just another promise that would dissolve like snow in spring. Why? Why now? Because I watched you give up on everything, Tommy said. Your career, your mobility, Mom, me, you let it all slip away because you thought you didn't deserve to hold on to anything good. He gestured to Rex, who'd returned to Jim's side. But you're fighting for him. A dog everyone's written off, a dog Morrison wants dead. You're fighting for something again, Dad. And I want to fight with you. Want to remember what it's like to stand beside my father instead of running from his shadow. Jim's throat tightened. It's going to be ugly. Morrison has power, resources, public opinion on his side. We've got 5 days to prove that a traumatized K9 with a history of aggression can be trusted. 5 days to change minds that are already made up. Then we'd better get started. Tommy pulled out his phone. I know people, lawyers in Seattle who owe me favors, PR specialists who can help control the narrative, and I've got something else, something Morrison doesn't know about. He hesitated, then continued. I've been doing research since I saw him on the news. Dad, Morrison's brother, the one killed by the police dog 15 years ago. The full story was never made public, but I found the sealed court documents. His brother wasn't just resisting arrest. He'd robbed a convenience store at gunpoint, shot the clerk, and was reaching for his weapon when the K9 engaged. That dog didn't murder anyone. It stopped a murderer. Jim absorbed this information slowly. Morrison knows this? He has to, but he spent 15 years rewriting the story in his head, making his brother the victim instead of the perpetrator, making the dog the villain instead of the hero. Tommy's jaw set with determination. If we can get those records unsealed, show the public the truth. It'll destroy him, Jim said. Whatever political capital he has, whatever moral authority he's built his crusade on, it'll all come crashing down. Good, Tommy said fiercely. He's trying to kill an innocent dog because he can't face the truth about his guilty brother. That deserves to be exposed. But Jim shook his head. No, we don't win by destroying Morrison. We win by saving Rex, by proving that broken things, dogs, soldiers, grieving brothers, deserve second chances, not execution. He looked at Tommy directly. Morrison's been carrying guilt for 15 years, just like I carried guilt about my brothers, just like you carry guilt about leaving. Exposing him doesn't heal that wound. It just adds more pain to a world that already has too much. Tommy stared at his father. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of fighting the wrong battles. Jim's hand found Rex's head. This dog taught me that in one afternoon. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't attacking. It's standing your ground and refusing to become the monster they say you are. After Tommy left, Jim sat in the darkened living room with Rex beside him. The house felt different now. Less like a tomb, more like a dwelling where the living might actually reside. Outside, the temperature dropped, and the windows frosted at the edges, creating crystalline patterns that caught the moonlight. 5 days, Jim said to Rex. 5 days to prove you're not what they think you are. 5 days to show this town that fear and loyalty aren't the same thing, even though they can look identical from the outside. He stroked the dog's scarred shoulder, feeling the ridge of tissue where the bullet had grazed. But first, we need to show you what you're capable of. Need to remind you who you were before grief convinced you that teeth and rage were the only languages left. Rex's ears pricked forward, attentive. Jim wheeled to the hall closet and retrieved a box he'd hidden there 2 years ago. A box Ellen had packed of his military gear before she'd gotten too sick to do such things. Inside were his old uniforms, medals he'd never displayed, photographs of brothers who'd never made it home, and beneath it all, a training manual for service dogs that the VA had given him when they'd tried to assign him Buddy. I couldn't look at this before, Jim admitted, pulling out the manual. Couldn't stand to see what I used to be. what I'd lost, but maybe I needed to lose everything to understand what actually matters. He opened the manual to a section on PTSD service dogs. Says here that dogs like you, dogs with trauma, can actually be better at recognizing and responding to human trauma. Something about shared experience, about understanding on a level that training alone can't teach. Rex moved closer, his nose investigating the book with interest. The scent of it, paper and ink, and the particular smell of institutional printing triggered something in his memory. Officer Miller had carried books like this, had studied them during downtime at the station, had trained Rex using techniques learned from pages just like these. "You remember?" Jim said, watching Rex's reaction. "You remember what it was like to work, to have purpose, to be more than just your pain." He flipped to a section on basic commands and response protocols. "Let's see if we can rebuild what grief broke down. Not to make you something you're not, but to remind you of something you've always been. A protector, a partner, a professional." They worked through the night. Jim would give a command, Rex would execute it, and slowly, so slowly, the rhythms of their partnership began to emerge. Sit, stay, come, down, heal. Each command was a thread weaving them together, creating a tapestry of trust and competence that neither had thought possible when the sun had risen that morning. But it wasn't just the basic commands. Jim worked on the harder things, the triggers, the responses to stimuli that sent Rex into defensive mode. When a car backfired outside, Rex lunged toward the window, hackles raised. But Jim's voice cut through the panic. "Rex, focus!" And the dog's attention snapped back to Jim's face, finding anchor in the calm authority there. "Good," Jim praised. "That's exactly right. The threat isn't real, but your fear is. I understand that. But you don't get to let fear make your decisions. You're a soldier, not a victim. Soldiers assess, adapt, overcome. They don't just react." By dawn, Rex was responding to commands with 90% accuracy. More importantly, he was beginning to distinguish between genuine threats and trauma-induced false alarms. When the newspaper hit the front door with a thump, Rex's body tensed, but he looked to Jim first before reacting, seeking guidance rather than defaulting to defense. "That's what Morrison needs to see," Jim said, exhausted but exhilarated. "Not a broken dog who might snap at any moment, but a trained professional who's learning to trust again, who's choosing not to be defined by his worst day." The sun rose over the Montana mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Jim dozed in his wheelchair, Rex curled at his feet, both of them depleted but more whole than they'd been in months, maybe years. They'd found something in the darkness. Not healing exactly, but the possibility of it. The understanding that broken didn't mean finished, that trauma didn't have to be identity, that loyalty could survive even death and devastation. The phone rang at 7:30, jarring them both awake. Jim fumbled for it, his sleep-deprived brain slow to process. "Hello? Jim Carter?" A woman's voice, professional and cool. "This is Dr. Margaret Chen from the State Animal Behavioral Assessment Unit. I've been assigned to evaluate your dog, K9 Rex, prior to the town council hearing. I'll be at your residence at 10 a.m. today for preliminary observation. Please have the animal secured and ready for assessment." Jim's blood ran cold. "Today? The hearing isn't until Wednesday. We have 5 days." "Had 5 days," Dr. Chen corrected. "Councilman Morrison petitioned for an expedited evaluation, citing public safety concerns. The judge agreed. If Rex fails this assessment, the hearing becomes moot. Euthanasia will be carried out within 24 hours. A pause. "I suggest you prepare the animal as best you can, Mr. Carter. I've reviewed his file. The prognosis isn't favorable." The line went dead. Jim sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, as the reality crashed over him. They'd had one night, one single night to rebuild what had taken years to create and months to destroy. And now a stranger with a clipboard and a mandate would decide whether Rex lived or died based on an evaluation designed to confirm existing biases, not discover new truths. "We're not ready," Jim whispered to Rex, who'd sensed the shift in his handler's energy and was alert, worried. "God help us. We're not ready." But they had no choice. Ready or not, Dr. Margaret Chen would arrive in 2.5 hours. And Rex's life would hang in the balance of whatever she decided to see when she looked at him. A dangerous animal that needed destroying, or a traumatized veteran that deserved saving. Jim looked into Rex's amber eyes and saw his own fear reflected back. But he saw something else too. Trust. Despite everything Rex had been through, despite every reason to give up, the dog was trusting Jim to lead them through this, to find a way to survive when survival seemed impossible. "Okay," Jim said, his voice steadying with resolve. "Okay. We've been through worse, haven't we?" "You lost your partner. I lost my legs. We've both lost people we loved, futures we planned, versions of ourselves we'll never get back." He cupped Rex's face in both hands. "But we're still here, still standing, or sitting in my case, still fighting. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all Morrison and Dr. Chen need to see. Two soldiers who refuse to surrender, even when everyone's already planned the funeral." Rex's tail wagged once, twice, not the hesitant twitch of yesterday, but something stronger, something that looked almost like hope. Jim grabbed his phone and called Tommy. "I need you here now. And bring a camera, professional quality if you can get one. If we're going down with evidence that we tried, that Rex tried, that we deserve better than what fear decided we were worth." "I'm already in my car," Tommy said, and Jim could hear the engine in the background. "Left Seattle at midnight. Been driving through the night." "I'm 20 minutes away." A pause. "We're going to fight this, Dad. Together." For the first time in 3 years, Jim believed him. Tommy arrived with 15 minutes to spare, carrying a professional camera rig and determination that bordered on fury. Behind him came Sarah from the shelter, clutching a folder of documentation, and Pastor Mike Thompson, whose presence carried the moral weight of the community's conscience. "What's this?" Jim asked, looking at the unexpected assembly on his front porch. "This is your support," Tommy said. "You think we're letting you face this alone? Morrison ambushed you with an early evaluation. Fine. We ambush back with witnesses, with documentation, with everything we can possibly throw at this Dr. Chen to make her see what's real instead of what she expects." Sarah stepped forward, snow dusting her jacket. "I brought Rex's complete file. Not just the incident reports Morrison's been circulating, but everything. His training records with Officer Miller, his commendations, the lives he saved before," her voice caught, "before Miller got shot." "Before everything went wrong." Pastor Mike gripped Jim's shoulder. "And I'm here because the good book says we speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Rex can't tell his story, but we can, and by God we will." Rex stood alert in the doorway, assessing these new arrivals. His body was tense but controlled, watching Jim for cues on how to respond. Jim gave a slight hand signal, one they'd practiced during the night, and Rex relaxed fractionally, accepting these humans as non-threats. "He's responding to commands," Sarah breathed, amazement clear in her voice. "Jim, in one night we've done what we had to do," Jim interrupted. "But it might not be enough. This Dr. Chen, she's coming with Morrison's bias already in her head. She's looking for reasons to confirm what she already believes, not evidence that might change her mind." "Then we change the game," Tommy said, setting up his camera. We document everything. Every command Rex follows, every moment of control, every sign that he's not the monster Morrison painted him as, and if she still rules against him, we'll have ammunition for an appeal, for public pressure, for... A sleek silver sedan pulled into the driveway, cutting off Tommy's words. The car was expensive, immaculate, the kind of vehicle that announced its owner's status before she ever stepped out. And when Dr. Margaret Chen emerged, she matched the car perfectly. Tailored suit, designer glasses, an expression of clinical detachment that suggested she'd made her assessment before ever meeting her subject. She was younger than Jim expected, maybe 40, with black hair pulled into a severe bun and a briefcase that probably cost more than Jim's monthly disability check. Her eyes swept over the gathered group with barely concealed disapproval. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice was crisp, professional, devoid of warmth. "I'm Dr. Chen." "I was under the impression this would be a private evaluation." "You were misinformed," Jim said, wheeling forward. Rex immediately moved to his right side, assuming the heel position without being told. "These people are here as witnesses, for documentation, for transparency." Dr. Chen's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is highly irregular. My evaluations are conducted under controlled conditions, without interference or..." "Without accountability?" Tommy interrupted, his camera already recording. "Without anyone to verify that your assessment is fair and unbiased?" Dr. Chen's eyes narrowed. "Young man, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm his son, and I'm documenting everything because Councilman Morrison has made it very clear that he wants this dog dead, facts be damned. So, yes, we're going to make sure every moment of this evaluation is recorded, witnessed, and available for public scrutiny if necessary." A flash of something, annoyance perhaps or grudging respect, crossed Dr. Chen's face. "Fine, but I warn you, any interference with my assessment will result in an automatic failure. The dog will remain under Mr. Carter's control at all times, and if at any point I feel threatened..." "You won't," Jim said firmly. "Rex is a professional. As am I. We'll cooperate fully, but we won't be railroaded by an evaluation designed to confirm predetermined conclusions." Dr. Chen's jaw tightened, but she opened her briefcase and withdrew a tablet and several assessment forms. "Let's begin. First, I need to observe the animal's baseline behavior. Mr. Carter, please bring the dog into the front yard. I want to see how he responds to open space, to my presence, to potential stressors." Jim wheeled down the ramp, Rex beside him without need for a leash. The morning sun glinted off the snow, bright enough to make everyone squint. Dr. Chen positioned herself about 15 feet away, tablet in hand, every inch the scientist observing a specimen rather than a living being with history and heart. "Command him to sit," she instructed. "Rex, sit." The dog obeyed instantly, his haunches lowering with military precision. Dr. Chen made a note. "Stay." Rex remained motionless as Dr. Chen walked in a wide circle around him, approaching from different angles, testing his response to movement in his peripheral vision. Rex's ears tracked her, his head turning slightly to keep her in view, but he held position. "Heel." Jim gave the command, and Rex fell into step beside his wheelchair as they moved in a figure-8 pattern across the yard. Perfect synchronization, the kind of teamwork that came from hours of practice or, in their case, from a desperate night of rebuilding what trauma had demolished. "Doctor." Chen's expression remained neutral, but Jim caught the slight narrowing of her eyes. She was seeing something she hadn't expected. Something that didn't fit the narrative she'd been given. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to approach you now," Dr. Chen announced. "I need to observe Rex's protective response. Please do not give him any commands unless absolutely necessary." She moved toward Jim, her stride confident but measured. Rex's body tensed immediately. his attention focusing on this potential threat to his handler. A low rumble built in his chest, not quite a growl but a warning. His lips pulled back slightly, revealing the edge of his teeth. Dr. Chen stopped. There. That's the aggressive response documented in his file. The defensive posturing, the warning signals, that's not aggression, Jim interrupted. That's assessment. He's evaluating threat level, determining appropriate response. Watch. Jim raised his hand in a signal they'd practiced. Rex, friend? The dog's posture shifted immediately. The rumble ceased, his lips covered his teeth, and though he remained alert, the hostile edge disappeared. Dr. Chen, you can approach now. Dr. Chen moved forward, clearly skeptical, but Rex, though vigilant, allowed her to come within arm's reach of Jim without escalating. His eyes followed her every movement, his body coiled and ready but under control. Under Jim's control. Interesting, Dr. Chen murmured, making more notes. The response is conditional. Controlled. She looked up at Jim. How long have you been working with him? 18 hours, Jim admitted. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. 18 hours? Mr. Carter, Rex's file indicates he's been unresponsive to command and control measures for 8 months. Multiple professional trainers attempted rehabilitation with 0 success. You're telling me that in less than a day? I'm telling you that Rex isn't broken, Jim said. He's traumatized. There's a difference. And trauma responds to understanding, not dominance. To connection, not control. Sarah stepped forward, offering the folder. Dr. Chen, if I may. Rex's history with Officer Miller shows consistent, exemplary performance for 4 years. He was decorated twice for service, once for locating explosives that would have killed a dozen people, once for apprehending an armed suspect without excessive force. His aggression only manifested after Miller's death, after 8 months of isolation in a basement kennel with no mental stimulation, no purpose, no reason to live, Jim finished quietly. They took everything from him, his partner, his work, his dignity, and then called him dangerous when he reacted like any living thing would to that kind of loss. They created the monster they're now trying to destroy. Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment, her professional mask slipping slightly. Mr. Carter, I appreciate your passion. But my evaluation isn't about Rex's past or his potential. It's about his current state, his risk level, whether he poses a danger to public safety. She glanced at her tablet. And the protocol requires me to test his response to high-stress stimuli, sudden movements, loud noises, unexpected physical contact. Then test him, Jim said. But do it fairly. Don't set him up to fail because Morrison wants him dead. Dr. Chen's expression hardened. I don't appreciate the implication that I would compromise my professional integrity for political purposes, Mr. Carter. I evaluate based on evidence, not pressure. Then you're a rare breed, Tommy said from behind his camera. Because Morrison's been pressuring everyone. The shelter, the town council, the media. Why would you be different? Because I care about the truth, Dr. Chen snapped, her composure cracking. Because I became an animal behaviorist to help animals, not condemn them. But I also have a responsibility to public safety. If Rex truly is a threat, if his trauma has damaged him beyond rehabilitation, then no amount of wanting him to be okay will change that reality. She pulled a small air horn from her briefcase. This is a standard stress test. I'm going to activate this horn without warning. Rex's response will indicate his stability under sudden auditory stress, the kind he might encounter in public spaces. Jim's heart hammered. They'd practiced responses to noise, but an air horn at close range was extreme. Rex was already on edge from Dr. Chen's presence, from the tension radiating from every human in the yard. One wrong reaction, one aggressive lunge, one snap of teeth, and it would all be over. Do what you have to do, Jim said, his voice steadier than he felt. But know this, if Rex fails, it won't be because he's dangerous. It'll be because you're testing a traumatized veteran with the same tools that traumatized him in the first place. Dr. Chen's finger hovered over the air horn's trigger. Rex sat at attention, sensing danger but waiting, always waiting for Jim's guidance. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow. Pastor Mike's lips moved in silent prayer. Sarah gripped her folder so hard her knuckles went white. Tommy adjusted his camera angle to capture everything. And Jim looked at Rex and thought about Helmand Province. About the moment before the IED detonated, when he'd had 1 second to realize his mistake, 1 second to know that everything was about to change, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. This felt the same, like standing on the edge of an explosion, waiting for the world to shatter. Dr. Chen pressed the trigger. The air horn screamed, a sharp, piercing blast that shattered the morning silence, that sent birds erupting from nearby trees, that echoed off the mountains with the kind of violence that turned peaceful moments into war zones. Rex exploded into motion, his body launched from sitting to standing, his hackles raised, teeth bared, every muscle coiled for attack. Dr. Chen stumbled backward, her professional detachment evaporating into pure fear. Her hand moved toward her briefcase. Toward what? Jim didn't know. Pepper spray, maybe, or a catch pole, or a phone to call animal control and have Rex destroyed on the spot. But Rex didn't attack Dr. Chen. He pivoted, placing his body directly between her and Jim, facing toward the sound, toward the perceived threat. His stance was protective, not aggressive, defensive, not offensive. He was doing exactly what he'd been trained to do for 4 years before trauma convinced him that everything was a threat and nothing was safe. He was guarding his handler, his person, his reason for being. "Rex!" Jim's voice cut through the ringing silence that followed the air horn's blast. "Stand down! No threat! Stand down!" For a heartbeat, Rex remained frozen, every instinct screaming at him to fight, to attack, to eliminate the danger before it eliminated him. But then Jim's voice penetrated the panic, found the trained soldier beneath the traumatized victim, and Rex's body began to relax. Inch by inch, the defensive posture softened. His lips covered his teeth, his hackles lowered. And finally, he turned away from Dr. Chen and returned to Jim's side, sitting in perfect heel position, trembling but controlled. The yard was absolutely silent, except for Rex's heavy breathing and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Dr. Chen stood frozen, her clipboard forgotten, staring at the dog who'd just proven everything and nothing about who he really was. "Doctor." Chen lowered her clipboard, her hands visibly shaking. The clinical detachment she'd worn like armor had cracked completely, revealing something raw underneath, not just surprise, but recognition. She stared at Rex, then at Jim, then back at Rex, as if recalculating everything she thought she knew. "That was," she began, then stopped, searching for words. "That was textbook protective behavior. Not aggression. Not an attack response. He positioned himself as a barrier between perceived threat and handler. That's exactly what K9s are trained to do." "That's what I've been trying to tell everyone," Jim said, his own voice unsteady with relief and residual fear. "Rex isn't dangerous. He's a soldier doing his job. The only difference is that grief taught him everyone was the enemy. But he's learning. We're both learning." Dr. Chen moved closer, her movements slow and deliberate now, clearly aware that she was being evaluated as much as Rex was. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward Rex. Jim nodded. "Rex, easy, friend." Dr. Chen extended her hand, palm down, allowing Rex to center. The dog's nose worked, gathering information, the smell of other animals she'd evaluated, the particular soap she used, the underlying scent of fear that even professionals couldn't completely mask. After a moment, Rex's tail gave a tentative wag. Not enthusiastic, not trusting entirely, but accepting. "Remarkable," Dr. Chen breathed. She looked up at Jim, and her eyes held something he hadn't expected: tears. "Mr. Carter, I need to be honest with you. I came here expecting to confirm Morrison's assessment. The file I was given painted a picture of an animal beyond rehabilitation, dangerous, unpredictable, a tragedy waiting to happen." She paused, collecting herself. "But what I'm seeing is a dog with PTSD responding appropriately to skilled handling. A veteran, both human and canine, finding their way back from trauma." Tommy zoomed in with his camera, capturing every word. Sarah wiped her eyes, not even trying to hide her tears anymore. Pastor Mike's amen was soft but fervent. "So what happens now?" Jim asked, not daring to hope. "Not yet." Dr. Chen straightened, her professional demeanor returning, but softer now, more human. "Now I complete my evaluation. But Mr. Carter, I need you to understand something. What you've accomplished in 18 hours is extraordinary, but it's also fragile. Rex has made progress, yes, but trauma doesn't heal in a day, or a week, or sometimes ever. There will be setbacks, triggers you haven't discovered yet, moments when the old fears resurface, and his response isn't this controlled." She looked directly at him. "Can you commit to continued training? To working with a certified trauma specialist? To accepting that some days will be harder than others, and that Rex may never be the dog he was before Officer Miller died? Can you commit to breathing even when your lungs are damaged?" Jim replied. "Can you commit to walking even when your legs don't work?" He gestured to his wheelchair, to the reality of his existence. "Dr. Chen, I've been living with permanent damage for 5 years. I know what it means to work around limitations, to adapt, to accept that some things will never be the same, but that doesn't mean they can't be good. Different, but good." His hand found Rex's head. "This dog and I, we're both learning to live with scars that won't heal. But scars don't mean we're broken. They just mean we survived something that tried to break us." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "I need to conduct a few more tests, standard protocols. But I want you to know." She hesitated as if debating whether to cross a professional line, then decided to leap. "I want you to know that I'm going into this wanting Rex to succeed. That's not how I usually approach evaluations. Usually I'm neutral, objective, following the data wherever it leads. But this case—" She looked at Rex, at Jim, at the small group of humans who'd gathered to bear witness. "This case matters. Because if Rex can come back from this, if you two can build something functional and healthy out of all this trauma, then maybe others can too. Maybe it proves that we've been giving up on damaged animals, damaged beings, too quickly." She spent the next hour putting Rex through his paces. Response to commands, reaction to sudden movements, behavior around strangers. Each test was designed to probe for weakness, for the cracks where danger might lurk. And each test Rex passed, not perfectly, but adequately, with control, with trust in Jim's guidance. When Sarah deliberately dropped her clipboard, the clatter making everyone jump, Rex flinched but didn't lunge. When Pastor Mike raised his voice in animated conversation, Rex's ears flattened, but he held position. When a neighbor's dog barked from 2 yards away, Rex's body tensed, and a low growl rumbled through him. But Jim's hand on his head, Jim's quiet, "Easy, boy," brought him back from the edge. "He's still reactive," Dr. Chen noted, writing continuously. "Hypervigilant. Shows signs of startle response and auditory sensitivity consistent with PTSD. But he's manageable," Jim countered. "Responsive to intervention, That's the difference between dangerous and damaged, isn't it? Dangerous can't be controlled. Damaged can learn to control itself with help. Dr. Chen looked up from her notes, and Jim saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke. Mr. Carter, based on this evaluation, I cannot in good conscience recommend immediate euthanasia. Rex demonstrates significant trauma responses, yes, but also significant capacity for rehabilitation under skilled handling. However, she raised a hand as relief washed over Jim's face. I have conditions, strict conditions, non-negotiable. Name them, Jim said. Weekly sessions with a certified animal trauma specialist. I'll provide referrals. Monthly progress evaluations conducted by my office. Any incident, any sign of aggression toward humans or animals must be reported immediately and will trigger an emergency reevaluation. Rex must be muzzled in public spaces for the first 6 months. And, she looked at Jim seriously, you must commit to your own therapy, because Rex's stability depends on yours. If you're having a bad PTSD day, he'll mirror it. Your trauma feeds his and vice versa. You heal together, or you fail together. Jim's throat tightened. Therapy. The thing he'd avoided for 5 years because talking about Afghanistan, about his brothers dying, about Ellen's slow death and Tommy's abandonment felt like volunteering to be flayed alive. But as he looked at Rex, at this dog who'd trusted him enough to climb out of his own basement hell, he knew there was no choice. I'll do it, all of it, whatever it takes. Dr. Chen's expression softened into something almost like a smile. Then I'll submit my report recommending conditional approval for Rex's adoption. Morrison won't be happy. He'll fight this. But my evaluation will carry weight with the town council, and if you can demonstrate continued progress at Wednesday's hearing, we'll be there, Tommy interjected, with documentation, with character witnesses, with everything we need to prove that second chances matter, that loyalty and love are worth fighting for. Dr. Chen packed her briefcase, but before leaving, she did something unexpected. She knelt in the snow beside Rex and looked into his amber eyes. You're a good boy, she said softly. You've been through hell and you're still trying, still fighting to be who you were meant to be. That takes courage. I'm not sure I could muster. She straightened, addressing Jim. Take care of him. He's special. They both are. Dogs who bond once and forever. Miller was his first person. You're his second. And German shepherds don't give that gift lightly. After she drove away, the group stood in Jim's yard, exhausted and exhilarated and aware that they'd won a battle, but not the war. Morrison still had the town council, still had public opinion shaped by 15 years of fear, still had the power to override Dr. Chen's recommendation if he could sway enough votes. We need a strategy, Tommy said, his mind already working. We've got until Wednesday, 3 days to change hearts and minds, to show people that Rex isn't a threat. He's a symbol of recovery, of second chances, of everything good that happens when we choose hope over fear. Sarah pulled out her phone. I'll contact the local news. Human interest story. Wounded warrior adopts traumatized K9. Both find healing together. It's perfect for the evening broadcast. Feel-good segment that also happens to put pressure on the council to do the right thing. Pastor Mike nodded. And I'll talk to my congregation. Sunday service is tomorrow. I'll speak about redemption, about not giving up on those who've served us, about, he smiled, about the good shepherd leaving 99 sheep to save the one that's lost. Pretty sure Jesus was including dogs in that parable, even if he didn't mention them specifically. Jim listened to them planning, strategizing, fighting for Rex with the same fierce determination they'd fight for family. And that's what they were, he realized. Not just allies of convenience, but family forged in crisis. Tommy, who'd found his way back to his father through a dog everyone wanted dead. Sarah, who'd risked her job to give Rex a chance. Pastor Mike, who'd dragged Jim from the edge of suicide to the edge of purpose. And Rex, always Rex, the catalyst for everything, the bridge between what they'd been and what they might become. "Thank you," Jim said, his voice rough with emotion. "All of you, for believing, for fighting, for—" He couldn't finish. "For seeing what was real instead of what we were told to see," Tommy finished for him. He crouched beside his father's wheelchair. "Dad, I spent 3 years seeing you as broken, as a burden, as someone I couldn't face because facing you meant facing everything we'd lost. But Rex," he reached out to stroke the dog's head, "Rex showed me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that surviving is its own kind of heroism, that love, real love, doesn't quit just because things get hard." Jim's hand covered Tommy's. "Your mother used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's being terrified and showing up anyway. I think—" He looked at Rex, at this dog who was afraid of everything but stayed anyway. "I think she'd be proud of both of us, of what we're trying to do here." "She'd be proud of all 3 of you," Sarah said. "Ellen would look at you two finding your way back to each other, at Rex learning to trust again, and she'd say," her voice caught, "she'd say that love doesn't die. It just changes form, finds new ways to survive, new hearts to shelter in." The afternoon sun had reached its zenith, turning the snow-covered yard into a field of diamonds. Rex lay at Jim's feet, his breathing steady, his eyes half closed in something that almost resembled peace. For the first time in 8 months, he wasn't in a basement, wasn't alone, wasn't waiting to die. And Jim felt something he hadn't felt since before the IED, before Ellen's cancer, before Tommy's silence. He felt hope, not the desperate, grasping hope of someone drowning, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who'd touched bottom and was finally, slowly, beginning to rise. "Wednesday," he said, "we make our stand, show Morrison and the council and anyone else who's watching that mercy isn't weakness, that second chances aren't naive optimism, that sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is write someone off as beyond saving." They spent the rest of Saturday preparing. Tommy edited footage, creating a short documentary of Rex's evaluation. The commands followed, the control demonstrated, Dr. Chen's visible shift from skepticism to advocacy. Sarah compiled testimonials from people who'd known Rex during his years with Officer Miller, painting a picture of the hero he'd been before grief had convinced him he was a monster. Pastor Mike reached out to other churches, other community leaders, building a network of support that would flood the town council meeting with voices demanding compassion over convenience. And Jim worked with Rex hour after hour, reinforcing commands, addressing triggers, building trust one moment at a time. By Sunday morning, Jim was exhausted but energized. He dressed carefully for church, first time in 5 years, because Pastor Mike had asked him to testify, to speak about Rex and recovery and what it meant to be saved by something you were trying to save. "You ready for this?" Tommy asked, helping Jim with his tie. A small intimacy they hadn't shared since before deployment, before everything changed. "No," Jim admitted, "absolutely not. But I'm going anyway because Rex can't speak for himself. And someone needs to tell his story, our story." The church was packed. Word had spread about the hearing, not Wednesday's official one, but Sunday's court of public opinion. People filled every pew, lined the walls, spilled into the vestibule. Some were there out of curiosity, others out of genuine concern, and some, Jim could see it in their faces, were there because Morrison had encouraged them to come, to stand firm against the dangerous element Jim was trying to introduce into their community. Rex walked beside Jim's wheelchair down the center aisle, and Jim felt every eye on them. Felt the fear, the judgment, the predetermined conclusions. But he also felt Rex's steady presence, the dog's confidence growing with each step, each moment that nothing terrible happened despite all his instincts screaming that it would. They reached the front of the church. Pastor Mike stood at the pulpit, his weathered face creased with compassion. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years shepherding this congregation, "we gather today to discuss a matter of life and death, not in the abstract but in the specific. K9 Rex, sitting beside Sergeant Jim Carter, is scheduled for euthanasia unless the town council decides otherwise on Wednesday. Some say he's dangerous, a threat, beyond redemption." Pastor Mike paused, letting the words sink in. "But I want us to consider another perspective. The perspective of a man who knows something about resurrection, about transformation, about the difference between being dead and being buried alive, waiting for someone to roll away the stone." He gestured to Jim. "Sergeant Carter has agreed to speak with us this morning, to share his story and Rex's story. And I ask that you listen, truly listen, not with fear, but with the compassion Christ commanded when he said, 'Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy.'" Jim wheeled to the front, Rex beside him. 100 faces stared back, waiting, judging, hoping, fearing. He'd faced enemy fire in Helmand without this level of terror. But he'd also faced the barrel of his own gun on dark nights when living felt harder than dying. And if he could survive that, if he could choose life one more time when death was so much easier, then he could do this. Sometimes the bravest warriors aren't the ones who never fell. They're the ones who got back up when everyone said they couldn't. Jim and Rex found each other in the darkest valley, two broken soldiers who refused to surrender. They discovered that healing doesn't erase scars. It gives them meaning. That loyalty survives even death. That second chances aren't just for the perfect, they're especially for the wounded. If you've ever loved someone everyone else gave up on, if you've ever been that person yourself, you know this truth. We don't heal alone. We heal together, one brave step at a time, trusting that love is stronger than fear. What would you do if your closest companion was labeled too broken to save? Have you ever been given a second chance that changed everything? Share your story in the comments, because every voice matters. Every story of redemption inspires another soul to keep fighting. Let's build a community that believes in second chances. Comment below.